Good evening and welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in Guyana over the past week or so. And as is the norm, we always have a packed agenda of issues to discuss. I want to begin by welcoming our viewers who are joining us on television from region number 5, West Coast Berbice. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. To our viewers who are joining us on television from across the Berbice River, on the east bank of the Berbice River, New Amsterdam, Kanji, along the Quarantine Coast, and all the way to Oriala and Siparuta. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. To our listeners and viewers who are joining us on Freedom Radio from Rob Street, Georgetown, welcome to another program of Issues in the News. And last but not least, to the thousands of you who are joining us on Facebook Live across the length and breadth of Guyana, the Caribbean, North America, Europe, Asia, Australia, and as far as the Middle East. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. Press that share button on your phone. If you are looking at this program on your computer, if you're looking at it on your iPad, if you're looking at it on your tablet, share it. Share it so that all your friends, all your followers can join us in our discussions tonight. And I want you to use the comment section of the program to voice your comments, ask questions, make suggestions, make the program interactive. So comment, ask questions. I'm looking at the questions. I'm looking at you. Bansi Prasad, Nadira Sadhu, Jagrup, Leslie Mangal, Ivorine Ramcharan, Dionanan Suknan, Jack Deo, Shirley Surajbali, and so many of you. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News, and share the program, share the live, and use the comment section to interact with us. I want to begin by speaking. There are so many things that I want to speak about tonight, but let's start with something that continues to concern Guyanese, and it is the death of Adriana Young. The death, as you know, is quite unfortunate and has been the subject of national mourning, has been the subject of national discussion, has been the subject of regional observation and discussion. And there have been many developments to and fro taking place in relation to this unfortunate tragedy. As of now, there is no clear indication when the funeral is likely to be. The parents seem undecided, and what is clear to me and what is clear to many persons who are observing is that this tragedy has been hijacked and different persons seem to be manipulating and exploiting it for different reasons, pursuing their own agendas. We saw grief and anger initially being overtaken by other sentiments and passions. We saw looters and criminal elements exploiting the situation, beginning from the premises itself, where the death occurred. That premises was burnt, destroyed, neighboring properties burnt, damaged. The property was looted as well. The owner's house, located some distance away, was also the subject of burning. The roadways were burnt, and it multiplied from there across several communities beyond Region 3. It extended to Region 4, to Region 5, to Region 6. And the politicians saw the opportunity to fuel the fire and did so. The looting and the burning took place across several regions. Persons were arrested. Many were remanded, charged and remanded. 3 pathologists of international standing were brought in by the government after the president promised a comprehensive, objective investigation. That investigation has begun. It has been temporarily put on hold because the family had initially asked that the funeral be allowed to take place. The funeral was, after it was initially planned, it was abruptly postponed. Politicians by that time had inveigled themselves already into the whole matrix, and they continue, in my humble view, to manipulate the situation. I was saying before I diverted that 3 pathologists of international standing, of high reputation, were brought into the country by the government and conducted a forensic examination, witnessed by representatives of the family, including doctors, lawyers, doctor, a lawyer, and relatives of the family. They made their pronouncements. Persons who are not at all qualified to contradict them have done so and are doing so in the public domain. A nurse aide emerged from the wilderness and professed to be present in the room at the behest of the Minister of Health. Later, she confessed that she was not there, and this disclosure of hers regarding her presence in the room was a creation of her own imagination. Very fertile mind, I must say. And there are attempts, I'm told, to get a 4th pathologist to come in. From the little that I know of pathology and what I have been advised by persons far more qualified than I am, the body in its current state, having regard to the time that would have elapsed, as well as the procedures already conducted on the body, would have deprived the body of any forensic value it may have had. So it's not competent for me to pronounce on what is the utility of pursuing another post-mortem, but that's the choice of the family. The body is theirs in law. The body has long been handed over by the police to the family. Whether another post-mortem or forensic procedure will produce anything of value would be a matter for those who are pursuing that course of action. My information is that it would be of very little or no value. The lawyer who was initially representing the interest of the family has apparently been dismissed because he spoke, being present in the room with the forensic pathologist, he spoke in support of the quality and comprehensive nature of the procedure embarked upon. And I believe he spoke to the professional manner in which the pathologists conducted themselves. The family doctor did the same, and I believe both of them ran afoul with the family because of their public disclosures in that regard. Another lawyer has entered the realm, and he professes to be some expert in pathology and in forensic sciences. If you ask the Bar Association, they will tell you that they are unaware of his training or expertise. But nowadays, everybody is an expert. And he is now taking his pound of flesh from this unfortunate saga, and he has been holding press conferences and doing interviews in the press and on the social media, expounding, as they say, waxing lyrically on this matter. I say that to you to give you an overview of how many different persons are pursuing their individual agendas in respect of this poor child's death. Even today, a bunch of politicians decided to go to the Arthur Chung Convention Center, where there is a conference of police commissioners of the Caribbean, and they went there, a few of them, in their placards to demonstrate. And of course, this motley crew was headed by no other than Nigel Hughes, the gentleman who, the night before the funeral, published on his Facebook page that he has information that the funeral scheduled to take place the following day is likely to be infiltrated by criminal elements who will unleash violence and will cause mayhem at the funeral. And I called upon him to disclose that information to the police, and the police made contact with him, and he refused to divulge that information on the basis that there is no whistleblowing legislation in place. So as I said last week, he was prepared to expose the public to violence, exposed hundreds of people to violence, chaos, confusion, pandemonium, while he protects his sources. I pointed to the Constitution, Article 32, imposing a duty on every citizen to assist the state in the combating of crime. I spoke to a common law obligation to that effect as well. I also adverted attention to the number of offenses in criminal law which touch and concern perverting the course of justice, obstructing the course of justice, and they may include, or they include, withholding valuable information or material information regarding criminal conduct or crime, or the commission of crime, or the potential commission of crime from the law enforcement authorities. So as I speak, we are no closer to the final resting date for young Adriana Young. I can't speak for the family, but it's quite unfortunate that this saga continues to procrastinate. The gentleman Staff Sergeant of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Leonard Makoshan, a very experienced, qualified homicide and suspicious death investigator, has been retained by the government of Guyana and is here in Guyana, has joined and will be joining the police force tomorrow. To be part of the ongoing investigations. And this is a promise that the President made, which is being delivered. There are demands for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to be called in, for Scotland Yard to be called in, and also the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Well, the government has opted for this one. And this was a promise made long before those calls. And the government has delivered on this promise. And the gentleman is in Guyana and will begin his work tomorrow. The Guyana Police Force is the lawful authorized agency to conduct investigations in Guyana. If it is that every time persons are affected by a death, or a death assumes the type of attention that this one has assumed, the government has to import law enforcement agencies. What will that do to the morale of the Guyana Police Force? But even more importantly, every family would then think that they are entitled to an investigation they're entitled to that their particular case, that they are entitled to their particular case being investigated by a law enforcement agency other than the Guyana Police Force. And where would it stop? No one's child is more valuable than the other. So on what basis would one family get this special treatment and it is not extended to others? When you are in government, you have to make decisions that do not set precedents, because you have to always take into account the public good. And there are a set of people in this country, there are a group in particular in the political realm who will never be satisfied with anything this government does. They will always use any opportunity they get, as they are doing now with this unfortunate tragedy, to score as much political mileage as possible. And that is all what this is about, that is unfolding here. And there is a tendency in this country, and let me deal with this in particular, that if the investigation does not yield a result that is acceptable to the politicians, they are considered that investigation as a cover-up, and they continue to say that that crime is unsolved, and they continue to list it whenever they recite their political narratives as a case without justice. So let me give you an example of what I'm speaking about. Up to now, you are hearing that there is no justice for the Henry boys, and they're asking questions about the Henry boys' murder. You know that very early, when that horrendous death took place in West Coast Berbice, very early, elements from the political opposition were on the road saying that that was a political crime committed by PPP supporters in the neighboring village of Cotton Tree. And they used that as a basis to burn the road and cause mayhem. Joseph Harmon and a team of others, including, I believe, Mr. David Granger, went up there, and whatever they said to the people in West Coast Berbice led to the road being blocked off, the fires being lit, and hundreds of people being beaten and robbed and properties destroyed. As it turned out, all of that was in vain, because I believe 4 young men, none of whom are from West Coast Berbice, were arrested by the police, and 3, I believe, out of the 4 confessed to the killing of the Henry boys. They were passed through the magistrate's court. They were charged with murder. Their preliminary inquiries were concluded, and they have all been committed to stand trial for the murder of the Henry boys. Yet you are going to hear what happened to the Henry boys. You're still hearing that, as though the Henry boys killing is still a matter for speculation. When you have persons who have confessed and have been charged and have been committed to stand trial in the High Court. Let us take Crummy Wing. Up to now, you hear about Crummy Wing's killing and Crummy Wing's murder, and they continue to direct their fingers in a political direction. Some of them brave enough to say that I am implicated. And they know full well that someone was charged with Comey murder, again committed to stand trial for Comey murder in the High Court. And when they were in government, on this very program, I repeatedly call upon them to reopen the Comey investigation if they were dissatisfied with it, or reopen the investigation, or better yet, hold a commission of inquiry. I am on the public record on more than 5 occasions calling upon them to do either of those two things. They used to hold a commission of inquiry if the breeze blow hard. Well, I asked them on more than 5 occasions. I wrote on letters, articles in the newspapers, calling upon them to hold a commission of inquiry into Comey killing. They never did. But every day, or ever so often, Comey is thrown into the pot as a mysterious killing of some political type. And I can go on. I can call many lists, many persons. The killing in Linden the other day. Somebody has been charged with murder. But apparently, if somebody from the People's Progressive Party is not implicated or not charged, then it's an unsolved murder. And there is no justice. One of the Henry Boy's relatives was charged with killing Harish Singh. He was charged with killing Harish Singh. And the lawyer that was involved attempted to create an alibi for him by saying that he was home with the rest of his family viewing a video that his father was using to video the autopsy for the Henry brothers from Georgetown, and he was transmitting it to a phone in their house, and this individual was there with the rest of the family looking at it. That is the statement that was given to the police. It turned out that the father who was present at the postmortem in Georgetown did not have a phone and was not streaming anything live. That same lawyer is a political leader today, and he is one of them who, speaking about this unsolved crimes. So that is what they do. The politicians, they do. And they keep repeating these things cyclically, all day long. I heard Hamilton Green list a whole list of people calling unsolved mysteries. And he lists all of them, and some of them I just mentioned. I can't remember all now. But he should explain. He should explain how Shirley Field Ridley died. And he should help us to understand how Vincent Tika died. You wouldn't hear that. But you will hear everything else. So, I thought that I would begin. I see I spent a lot of time on this matter already. So let's move on. As I mentioned, the 39th Annual General Meeting and Conference of the Association of Caribbean Commissioners of Police is taking place in Guyana at the Arthur Chung Convention Center. I had the privilege of attending the opening session, and I participated in one of the panel discussions, and I'm scheduled to participate in another later this week. Crime, in particular violence, violent crime, and the administration of criminal justice, is now a main priority in the Caribbean region. And the heads of government have recognized crime as a public health hazard and have embarked on a number of initiatives to address this issue. From a legislative platform, they have tasked the Legal Affairs Committee of CARICOM, that is the organization of all the attorneys general of the region, to expedite a number of model legislation intended to tackle violent crimes in the region. And work has already begun in this regard. We have 3 of those legislation that will be debated come this Friday at a sitting of the National Assembly. And they are the Advanced Passenger Information and Passenger Name Record Bill, the CARICOM Arrest Warrant Bill, and the Regional Security System Bill. These are model legislation or common legislation that will be passed in all the territories with minor changes. And we will have a slew of regional type legislation of this genre in the near future. The regional security system will now become perhaps the premier regional law enforcement agency of the Caribbean. And it will be in every country. So Guyana is passing this bill that will incorporate the RSS formally into the law enforcement apparatus of Guyana. And this is being done throughout the Caribbean. At the level of prosecution and detection, detection and investigation, there is another task force addressing that issue. And one of the concepts that are being pushed is the establishment of a regional modern forensic laboratory. And President Dr. Mohabir Anil Nandlall has volunteered Guyana to host that forensic laboratory. The Caribbean Court of Justice is playing a role in dealing with the prosecutorial and adjudicatory aspect of the reforms. Of course, it is being done also by a task force at the level of the executive, but fortunately, the Caribbean Court of Justice is also on board because they recognize that the criminal justice system in particular, in relation to the magistrates court, is in crisis. And they are working in partnership with CARICOM governments in addressing criminal justice in the Caribbean and addressing the challenges that are being faced. So it's a massive reform taking place at the level of the criminal justice systems across the Caribbean. And that obviously is one of the main focuses of the police commissioners' conference. For example, one of the things that they're looking at is a regional witness protection program. Since 1999, an agreement was signed by several heads of state. And a model bill was produced out of that agreement. It has not been operationalized in many of the CARICOM states, although many have passed it. We passed it here under the previous administration in 2018, but never brought it into operation. That's one of the things, one of the measures that is being considered at this conference here in Guyana. Of course, individual countries have their own witness protection program. Jamaica has a witness protection program. Trinidad has a witness protection program. I think the Bahamas has a witness protection program. But they are individual insular programs rather than a regional one. And the idea was to have a regional one. So there are many things, important issues and measures that are being scrutinized, reviewed, and examined for implementation in the near future. As I am on the justice system, someone brought to my attention a Facebook post of the APNU, and it's dated 12th of May 2025, and it's a statement that's attributed on the APNU AFC Facebook page to Mr. Aubrey Norton. And I will read what the statement says. It says, justice must be real, not selective. I agree with that. Justice ought not to be selective. Under an APNU government, the courts will serve every Guyanese equally and fairly. That's a commendable aspiration. But this is the part. Because fairness should never depend on your wallet. Because fairness should never depend on your wallet. Well, Mr. Norton is clearly attributing to the judiciary an ulterior motive and an immoral motive, in fact an improper motive, a corrupt motive. He's saying that the judiciary is influenced by the wallets of the people who appear before them. Now, if Norton has information that judges and or magistrates are deciding cases based upon financial and pecuniary influences and rewards, then he must come out and say so. Now, I have been critical of the judiciary, as you know, but I ensure that I couch my criticism in acceptable terms. I have often said that there is no sacred cow, and the judiciary must be subject to public scrutiny and public commentary, even outspoken commentary. But the commentary must be fair, it must be constructive, it must be respectful, and it must not attribute to the judiciary a sinister, ulterior, improper, or corrupt motive. Well, here Mr. Norton is saying that justice depends upon the wallet of the litigant. This is a most serious allegation to make. And it's either Mr. Norton withdraws this statement or he produces the evidence. And I don't wish to go back, but just to remind, because Mr. Norton is telling us when APNU, under an APNU government, the courts will serve every Guyanese equally and fairly. But the truth of the matter is, when Mr. Norton's party, the PNC, was in government, there are volumes and volumes of evidence to illustrate beyond doubt that the judiciary was under the political influence of Mr. Norton's party. And a simple but undisputed example that I can point to as evidence of this influence is the fact that after Mr. Norton's party abolished appeals to the Privy Council and removed the Privy Council from the judicial system of Guyana, thereby making the Court of Appeal of Guyana our final court. They then took the Court of Appeal, the PNC flag, and flew it on top of the Court of Appeal building. And they nailed the flag also on the front wall of the building. Can you imagine that the political party flag of the PNC being flown on top of the building and nailed on the front of the building? That is heretic for you to contemplate, to even contemplate, but it actually happened in this country. So there are certain things that Norton and his party cannot speak about. Well, many things. Track record in government is one. Democratic credentials is another one because they rigged all elections. And when it comes to influencing independent organizations and constitutional bodies, because I don't want to go down the road of telling you how many other agencies that are supposed to be independent, they penetrated and controlled or attempted to do so. Because I can give you examples between 2015 and 2020. But I don't want to let that take over the program. I think I've said enough on that matter. So, share the live. I am trying to get some comments to see what you're saying so that I can answer your questions which you may have. But I'm not seeing much coming up there because the screen is frozen. But keep sharing the program so that you and your friends can join us in our discussion. Now there is an important matter that I want to express my view on. Guyana is a secular state, but Guyana, through its supreme law, like many other democratic and civilized nations, Guyana guarantees as a fundamental right and freedom the freedom to worship, the freedom to practice a religion of one's choice, the freedom to expression, freedom of conscience, freedom to practice as many religions as you wish. And in any multi-religious society, a fundamental tenet of that religious freedom is religious tolerance. And in Guyana, we have a multi-religious tapestry. We have a multi-ethnic population. And I must say that we have had, I believe, a reasonably commendable tradition of religious diversity, mutual respect for religion, religious tolerance, and we have been a God-fearing people. I think I can say so. And I am happy to say, in my respectful view, that that approach cuts across all the major religions of our country. The Christians respect the Hindus respect the Christians, the Muslim respects the Christians, the Muslim respects the Hindus respects the Muslims, the Rastafarian, the Baha'is. They all intermingle and commingle with respect, with dignity, and with reciprocal tolerance. And that has been the history of our country. So when you get a publication of the type that emanated from some character called Baby Skello, it shocks the conscience of all of our religious people, irrespective of your religious denomination. Because we are a religious society by and large. It shocks the conscience of every God-fearing person. And this man, Baby Skello, never heard of him before, until I saw the outrage being expressed by some song that he sang or made. And I looked long and hard before I found this song. And when I couldn't bear to listen beyond a few seconds, because it shocked my conscience as well. This is the most sacrilegious, the most outrageous, vulgar, vile. There are no set of words that can appropriately express the type of condemnation that is deserving of this inane and insane rantings of this man. So this type of lewd vulgarity must be condemned in the strongest possible way, and I do so. I have received a letter from the president of the Guyana Hindu Dharmic Sabha, addressed to Shalimar Ali Haq, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and carbon copied to me, asking for the DPP's examination of the matter and for her to consider recommending appropriate criminal charges. Hindus across the country have reached out to me, Pandits across the country have reached out to me, expressing their outrage, expressing their hurt, expressing a deep sense of disrespect. And they are justified in every sentiment that they have felt. I know that the person was arrested, and I know that the matter is being investigated. But this must never reoccur, not in relation to Hinduism, not in relation to Christianity, not in relation to Islam, or not in respect of any other religion. This must be condemned in the strongest possible way, and I do so vehemently. And the other, since I am on this topic, the Hindus across this country have made a connection between this sacrilegious ranting of this man. They have made a connection between this sacrilegious ranting and the bizarre, reckless, and unfounded contention that was being advanced and perhaps is still being advanced by certain persons that the death of Adriana Young is somehow related to Hinduism and is part of some type of sacrifice. That is disrespectful of Hinduism. No one can produce any type of evidence that Hindus or Hinduism advocates human sacrifice or human sacrifices. So I don't know where these things are concocted and why they are fabricated. But these irresponsible dissemination of unfounded information and raw ignorance must stop, because it can have consequences. Now, I don't know if there is a connection, but many persons, many Hindu leaders, far more qualified than I am to speak on these matters, educated people, have made a nexus between these two incidents. And this is how things can spin out of control and this conflagrate into things that can become far more problematic. So we have to be careful when we live, when we say these things, because we live, as I said, in a multiracial, multicultural society, and we have a good reputation of peaceful coexistence. But ever so often, you find the reckless utterances. And the same way that the political leaders, some political leaders, went to embrace the criminal elements, the same way that they embraced the looters and the burners and those who destroyed properties, you saw many political leaders adopted them. I have not heard these political leaders condemn these wild, reckless, and inflammatory insults to one of the largest religious grouping in this country. And one of the, in fact, the oldest religion in the world. Billions of people worship in accordance with Hinduism. But these political leaders that I'm speaking about, not one of them I have seen condemn. In fact, silently they may be promoting it, for all you know. But they embrace what they call the scrapes. They embrace them. They adopted them. They are representing their interests. They are calling for reduction of charges, but not a word about those who attempted to say, and perhaps are still saying, that the tragic death of that young lady had something to do with religious sacrifices connected to Hinduism. Some of them have even gone as far as saying that it is connected to the People's Progressive Party electoral preparations. I mean, how crazy can you get? But I suppose that we are living in a crazy world. Today, I attended the funeral, well rather the viewing of Amna Ali. You all know Amna Ali very well. Many of you recall the incident on March the 2nd at Monrepo Primary School, where Amna accused me in her inimitable style, with that thrilling voice, of distributing ID cards and distributing T-shirts. I could hear her voice. Anil, your name calling. Anyway, Amna is not with us anymore. I bid her, I was part of a grouping that attended the viewing at the CIOG, and I played my minor little role in bidding her goodbye. May her soul rest in peace. I have passed program time, and I want to thank you very much for being with me for the past hour. I believe we have covered a lot of grounds. We have discussed a lot of important issues. And until I see you next week, please enjoy the rest of your evening and enjoy the rest of the week. Stay healthy, and may God bless you. Thank you very much.